So today I talk with entrepreneur David Murphy-Longhini. We met about 8 years ago now at SUNY University at Buffalo. And the first time we met, he was actually pitching as a president of AKPsi. And he made an impression on me, not only because Greeks became suddenly real, while I've only saw that in movies, but mostly because his drive and his eloquence made me think right away that he may become a politician or a CEO. And today it's my pleasure to discuss with him on how he launched and is running his company, whether it's personality driven and or a sense of purpose. So welcome and thank you for being here.
Very much.
So in one of your articles, you stated that the pursuit of not striving for perfection is what influenced your decision when starting Empodio, your company. Can you walk us through the thought process and the execution?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that tie into that. The first is that life in its own is a lot of experimentation and trying to figure things out. And if you're always pursuing perfection, Tony Robbins' quote is that perfection is an impossible standard, so it's really the lowest standard because you're not allowing yourself to take any action for fear of failing or for fear of not being perfect. And that became extremely vital for me, not even so much about starting the business, but about actually growing the business. Because making the leap, I just had to tell myself, hey, we're going to be able to figure it out along the way. But actually, the hardest things and the most traumatic pieces of growing a business are recognizing that you're going to be really poor at most of the things you're trying to do. And if you're somebody who's aiming for perfection at all times because you're afraid of failing, you're afraid of doing poorly, then you're just going to get such high anxiety or be unable to take a step that you're eventually just going to collapse and cry. And I'm not saying that you're not going to collapse and cry if you don't strive for perfection, but a huge piece of it is recognizing what Peter Thiel talked about of 0 to 1. You're starting from an absolute zero. So everything is going to be highly mediocre. Every part of your business could get better when you're starting out. By its very definition, there's nothing there. So it's really hard to do that because you're simultaneously recognizing that everything that you're doing is mediocre at best, but you also have to put yourself out there and you're afraid. And you're reaching out to people and saying, you should work with me. I don't even have a working website. I have no references for you, and my process is me figuring it out as I go. But I promise you that I'm going to deliver really well. Like, everybody in life wants to have everything seem perfect, and that's what a lot of Instagram is. That's what a lot of people posting nice things on Facebook. That's what wearing a suit and being perfectly buttoned up and down looks like before you go out there. That's what spending an hour and a half getting ready to go to the bar is like. If you're going to put yourself out there to new people, you at least want to look so perfect that it can't be that's at fault. And that's impossible starting a company. There's no way that your sales is going to be incredible, your services is going to be incredible, that your pitch, your delivery, there's no way for it to be perfect. And a lot of people spend all of their time trying to get to something perfect before they put it out there. And that's a shortcut to wasting a lot of time and money and never chasing your dreams. Because really starting a business, when it comes down to it, has most resonated with me by Sam Owens that runs a consulting.com course, where he's like, most people try to build something perfect, then go out there and try to sell it. And he's like, the shortcut to success is actually the opposite. It's go to people, figure out what they want, then find a way to give it to them. And the only way to do that is to go out there and to really say, what do you want? Then try to build something really simple and say, like, is this what you want? And have them be like, no, that's not what I want at all. Collect a ton more information, come back with a V2 and have them be like, well, that's a little better, but it's still garbage. And then to go back again and again and again and refine, building only the things that really, really make sense and really work for you. But you've got to face putting yourself out there as a complete fraud. and be able to be willing to say to people, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just starting. I would appreciate your help. This is what I know. This is what I don't know. Will this work for you? And we don't like to do that. We like to be buttoned up and put on the face, but it's impossible to be perfect and be an entrepreneur, because if it was perfect, there wouldn't need to be an entrepreneur trying to figure it out.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Actually, for you, it's recognizing that you don't know it and being honest and authentic with the customer. Actually, like this made me think about Sarah Blakely, who,
Oh, yes, thanks.
yes, exactly. But what she said is what you don't know can be your greatest strength, because you can achieve a way that people never thought of. Like she never had business lessons or degrees, and she didn't know how to reach out to Neiman's, for instance. So she just gave him a call. And Oprah was so surprised when she learned about that. She was like, how did you land Neiman's? And I just called them. She said, really? So, and I think this is aligned to what you're stating, right? But at the time, yeah, it's being able to just share this openly and start somewhere. So yeah, you talked about how the most difficult part is about growing, but I know that most people don't even start because of all these risk of failure and so on. So, and they're especially scared if they are doing it on their own. So what would be your advice? And I know also you co-founded Empodio with Alex. So how did you find each other, and how did you come to this idea?
I actually spoke about this with another friend who's an entrepreneur about 3 months ago, because he was saying, I'm never going to do partnerships. And that's because he spent 3 years in a partnership with his stepdad and it was horrible. And then afterwards he's like, oh, I'm going to reach out and find somebody. And I was like, that's your problem. You never want to do a partnership with somebody you don't know or isn't well enough. And a lot of it tends to be like, you're at an entrepreneurship event and someone is like, I like this technology. And someone else is like, I like this technology too. Let's start a business. That would be the equivalent of going speed dating. And someone's like, I like hiking. You like hiking? Let's get married for the next 7 years. Like, it just doesn't work. You really got to know who the person is, what their strengths are, do a lot of talking about it. Like, I could not have started a business without Alex. I just couldn't have. Our balancing each other out has really worked. However, I knew Alex. He worked with me at Blue Wolf for a year and 6 months, and I knew how he worked. I knew who he was. I'd spent significant time with him. I knew his experience. And then we kept up talking, and we both went our separate ways to different companies. And then we were essentially on the phone complaining to each other about where we were and how we could do things better. And eventually it was what they call in the book the E-myth, the entrepreneurial seizure, where all of a sudden you're like, I could do this better. And you're right and you're wrong, because you could probably eventually do it better. But as the first question stated, first you got to do it a lot worse. But it was a lot of trusting, and we ended up spending a lot of time in a cabin and at a farm and an Airbnb, just like figuring out how we work together and piecing those things together. And that's even with me and Alex having literally the exact same personality type on every single test. We're like 97% similar, so we know how each other think, we know how each other work. We actually brought on a third person who is not a co-founder, but a major director. 1 second. Dog's coming in. And it took me a long time. It took me 6 months to really build a strong relationship with him, because he has the opposite personality. And we needed him because me and Alex are way too scattered, way too ADHD, this is a good idea, let's go chase this. And he's much more methodical, much more well-driven. And it took me a lot of time to really build a relationship with him, because we had contrasting viewpoints. And that's something relatively common in a lot of technical partnerships, because you'll have a sales and a dreamer married to a software engineer, And the dreamer's like, we could do this. And the software engineer's like, that would take 12 weeks. Are you sure you want to do that? Trying to piece those things together and build the relationship. But I would really just recommend that if you're interested in starting a business now, go get involved in your startup and entrepreneurial scene and meet a ton of people and spend a lot of time with them, because chances are you're going to want to start a business with somebody you've known for a minimum of 6 months, because it's like a marriage. There's finances involved. You're spending more time together than most people do with their spouses. And you've got to be able to trust each other on all of these things. And you hear a lot of horror stories of people who like show up at an event, do a startup weekend together, and then they become co-founders. And then they find out that that person's not going to be honest, not going to do the right things, because they only had 72 hours with them and they decided to start a business together.
Yeah, and you do have a fourth co-founder, your dog out there.
Yep, Dobby keeps me company during COVID.
Definitely. And well, when you're saying this, like for you, it's a partner, a work partner, which is super important. And most often what we say is, yeah, this relationship with your team is what is critical to making people stay at a company, right? This culture. So from your previous experience, what was missing and what has each experience brought you so that you can lead the company and run the company as you want today?
So I think a huge piece of it is ambition to try to do more. And I think about this a lot, that a company, and it's sometimes it sounds like you're talking to a hippie, but it is that balance of companies are designed to make money. And in order to do so, they create fixed roles. And those roles have to accomplish a certain thing in order to make things work. And you can only contain a certain amount of chaos and a certain amount of order in a business before it blows up, because it's not going to be efficient. So at most of the roles I was at, you're fit within a very specific role of what you're supposed to be doing and what's there, and it's within the timeline of the company, and the company is trying to create like a tiny amount of chaos within its order to iterate and improve under force. And that means that you have a tiny amount of leeway of what to do, and you see ideas and they're like, too quick, too fast, people aren't ready, because they want the stability. And so even though I chose roles where I was an analyst and my real role was to identify, discover, and design and implement change, companies only have a certain appetite for change, especially at a specific scale. So when I was at my first job out of college in Micro, I was there, and internal politics at the top kept me from actually doing my job. And it was a blessing and a curse, because I ended up reading about 150 books while getting paid to sit there and told to wait until senior management figured out what to do. But eventually I got bored of that. And then I went to a company, Rich Products, that was an absolutely wonderful company that when I left, the CIO there sat me down and he said, I knew this was coming. And I was like, what? What do you mean? And he actually said something to me that was really prescient, that he's gone from there. So I'll be very blunt of what he said. And he was a wonderful CIO, but he looks at me and he goes, David, as a CIO, I have 200 people on my staff of being able to pull these things together. And he's like, 4% of them are absolutely outstanding. 40% of them are good. 30% of them are mediocre. And I'm not going to do the math, but the rest are poor. And he's like, what I really do is I try to push the poor people out of the organization, help the mediocre become good, have the good people be satisfied, but I ignore the extraordinary people. And I was like, why? And he's like, because they're either going to appreciate what we have to offer, which is a wonderful family firm where you have a lot of stability, we keep things here, and they're going to do their job forever, or they're going to get bored and leave. And if I try to cater to those extraordinary people, I'm going to disrupt the organization in such a way that the good people are going to become dissatisfied. And they're the main body of people who show up every day, doing good work, making things happen. And he's like, I looked at you and you already want to be promoted because you're bored and overqualified for the work that you're doing. And he's like, I have people who have been here for 7 years who aren't at the title that you have that are already dissatisfied. And then if I give you a promotion, within another year, you're just going to be bored again. And I'm going to have nowhere to put you. So he's like, so you do incredible work, but unless something, and he's like, and I'd invite you back to the organization in a heartbeat. But if you tried to come back, I'm going to look at you and say, have your priorities changed? Because if they haven't, then I'm just going to be a place to work that doesn't suit what you're looking for. So I ended up at a consulting company that I left for, and they had been acquired by IBM right before I joined, but IBM was really in a watch and wait period. And during that period, I absolutely adored this organization. They had an entrepreneurial spirit. They were able to move things. It was really, really kind of family driven and really gratitude driven. And I would have stayed there for a long time. I appreciated everyone there and I learned a ton. I learned what a good culture looked like. And then IBM started to take over. And IBM, to put it bluntly, destroyed everything I held dear. They formalized everything so that everything was harder. There was no more like colloquial, like this person's doing great, can we let them do this thing? There were formalized roles. And at the time that they took over, I was talking with my manager and I was in a really interesting role and I wanted another one. And she was just like, IBM won't let that happen. Because I was like, I kind of want to be a bit of this, a bit of this, and a bit of that. And I'm willing to do a ton of work to make that happen. She's like, IBM won't do that. And then all of a sudden, IBM was in a hiring freeze and there was that flexibility. And it wasn't until now, owning a business, that I understand what that looks like. Because you can't provide too much flexibility in the organization, because at the end of the day, the organization exists to serve the needs of the customer. And then you do the best you can to provide employees flexibility within that. But IBM, with 370,000 employees, couldn't. They were just like, we need to have these fixed roles. We can't allow that level of flexibility because it would be impossible to manage. How do you track that across hundreds of thousands of employees? And so I ended up leaving there, but we used to say, I joined Blue Wolf, I left IBM. Did you have a question?
No, I'm listening. Yeah, go ahead.
And then I went to a company called Click Software, which had a lot of what I was looking for, but not all of it, where they were on the fast path to get acquired by Salesforce. And what was really hard is if I didn't really want to start a company, Click Software would have been an incredible place to work. My problem was this, and I wrote in an article about it. When I left Blue Wolf, I really wanted to start a company, but I got really, really scared. And I actually opened up my LinkedIn, like to say that I was open for jobs, because I was looking for a contract opportunity to use to start my business, to look for like a 20-hour a week, 3-month contract that would provide me the funds and the extra time to figure out how to start a business. But 2 days in to having my jobs open, Click Software reached out and pretty immediately offered me a job at a salary that was way beyond my expectations. And I got scared and I said, okay, I'll take this. And I told myself, which ended up being true, that it would teach me relevant things and give me relevant skill sets to be able to start a business later. But I spent my entire year at Click Software feeling like a fraud. I spent the entire year with my brain arguing with me, being like, but this isn't what you want. I'd sit there and I'd be like, well, this is a fast track to a really high position at Salesforce. And it was for all of my coworkers who I left. And they ended up getting acquired by Salesforce, and they all have incredible jobs in high positions with a fast track in a fast growing company. But in the back of my head, my brain was going, but that's not what you wanted. That's not what you were looking for. And it's like right out of the book, The Alchemist. Like I was battling with myself every day. And it got to the point like 6 months into that job, and I posted in an article, I was on a vacation and I couldn't enjoy the vacation because I was trying to quiet the voice in the back of my head saying like, you're going to have to go back. You don't want to go back. And I was literally writing, you will quit your job. You will quit your job in a journal page on repeat, trying to convince myself to do it. And I was scared. And I stayed. And then really, I said in the article, the only reason I didn't leave then was news came that Salesforce was in talks to buy it. And I was like, I'll stay around. I'll stay around for the finish line. I don't want to let my team down. And then that fell apart, and weeks became months. And at the 1 year mark, I got on with my manager, and it really helped that I'd talked with Alex, and we were really excited. We were going to start a company, and we thought we had a job, and it actually fell through after we quit. An opportunity to work on our first deal. And I talked to him, and I'm like, Matt, I can't do this anymore. Like, if you tell me that we're going to get acquired in a month or 2 months, because he knew, but he couldn't tell me, I'll stay for just that, just to help you, not to have you have issues, like, because I really respect and I love this team, but I'm not going to be able to stay for the long run. I'm not staying for Salesforce. I really got to go. And I just really want to honor you and to help. And he's like, I think it's time to go. And the ironic part, I said in that article, he tried to convince me to stay many, many times over that year. And he knew. And it was about 6 months in, he looked at me and he said, David, I need you to understand something. When you're ready to go, I need you to tell me you're ready to go, because you're an incredible employee. And my job is to keep people at the company. It's like, I'm never going to be like, go chase your dreams. You're going to have to tell me, and I'll respect that decision. But up until that point, my job is to keep a grade A player here. And that was a really important moment for me, because I wanted the rest of the world to give me permission so I didn't have to let them down. And he was very blunt with me that that wasn't going to happen. It doesn't work that way. You're going to want to leave your job, and your significant other is going to say, like, oh, how are we going to make the bills? Or your parents are going to tell you you're stupid for leaving a stable job. Or your friends are going to be like, how are you even going to make money? You've never run a business. The rest of the world is going to tell you no. And sometimes you should listen if it's like another entrepreneur telling you your idea is really stupid and trying to get you to collect more information. But if it's just your family, or you're this or you're that, you're never going to get to the point where everything's in your favor. And I can't remember which book said this, but they're like, there's never going to be an easy time to go against society. There's never going to be the moment when your parents, your family, your friends, your job are all like, go, you have my blessing. You have to make that choice. And you're never going to get to the point where you're going to be ready. It's kind of like having kids. You can't be ready for that. You can take a couple classes, you can meditate, you can do this, but you're going to have to learn along the way. There's no way to be ready to be in this position before you take the leap.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, from what you're saying, paradoxically, I think what's happening is like your leader, your true leader, creating other leaders rather than people just following the rules because they knew they couldn't keep you as such, right? Whether, I mean, they let you go in a way, but it's your decision, or they kind of put you in that box, but they knew you wouldn't actually be fulfilled at your position, so it isn't worth it, which is, yeah, super interesting.
And one thing to balance out is really, it's almost like balancing out millennial beliefs about work. And it's something that I really see about this is, I was listening to a Tim Ferriss podcast with Stephen Pressfield, who talked about this, where he's like, the best advice he ever got, and he's now a famous author, was actually like a 50-year-old grizzled old man who was a dispatcher for a truck company, who sat him down, just said, I don't know what you're going through, and it seems like you're going through a lot, but you just need to understand, this is a company. Our job is to make money. We have roles to figure it out. We need you to do the job. Like, this isn't the place for self-actualization. We can't do that. Like, we can have a great camaraderie, we can have a balance, we can have a culture, but those are all add-ons that companies do to try to provide it. At the end of the day, we're limited by what we're capable of the service we're trying to provide. And I genuinely think I was asking too much of the work. I was asking a company that basically said, here, come here and help us improve our CRM, or help us consult, or help us do this. And I was looking for them to be my end all be all. And I spent way too much of my life over focusing on that work. And they can't do that. And I now do this for my employees too, where I look and I say, I need you to be excellent at servicing and providing the customer. Sure, we provide a great culture. We look for things after work. We really want you to appreciate you as people and to provide you everything we can without having a detriment to our customers and to what we're doing. But when people ask too much of their workplace, you can only do too much. And I really looked, and some of that advice came from the book Street Smarts. And I'm forgetting the name of the guy who wrote it, but he's like, if you're going to start a business, the life plan comes before the business plan. You have to figure out what you want for your life and then design your business once it's growing to provide it. Because if your business plan is your life plan, eventually you're going to be like those people of like, be careful what you wish for, because you're going to end up as one of my favorite Tim Ferriss things that him and his friends use to keep themselves from getting too focused is like, are you going to end up the bald man in the red Corvette? Like, are you going to make it to 55, having worked your ass off, done all of these things, and then look back and say like, I finally made it to VP, or I finally made the company to $1 million or $10 million or $100 million. And then look back and say like, what was it all for? What was this? You've got to make the life plan come first.
So what is your life plan?
Right now, I'm figuring that out. I'm going to be real honest that starting a company was chaos. And I think I posted about that on the new year, where I was like, this is really, we had a couple different stages of the company in the last 18 months. The first 3 months, we didn't really had a company. We had decompressing from working for other companies and pretending we had a company. And then eventually we're like, oh, we should go make money. Then we had like a 7 or 8 month period in which me and my co-founder were really working for other people doing subcontracts using our skill sets. And at that point, we didn't have a company. We were consultants, subcontractors for other people. Then we had this massive idea for what the company would be and what we were capable of, hired too many people too quickly without the right skill sets, prioritizing the wrong things, and nearly burned ourselves out. We went way too far, way too fast without relevant experience, and had to let people go, tell a project that it was just like, that we're not going to be able to make this work, and then spend really 3 months like decompressing and learning from our mistakes. And it's only recently that we have a company that's doing really well. Like, we have our processes in place. We have the right people in the room. We're profitable and have a capability to be really profitable. And we feel like we have the right things. And it's almost like I just came out of the oven, and then I'm staring at it going, okay, now I've got this and I see where it's going. And it's almost like, now that it's no longer this mythological, like, fast company, fortune, startup, this, like, I'm running a company. It's making money. We will hire, we will grow. You get to the point like, is that all there is? And I'm genuinely at that point now over the next 3 weeks, or last 3 weeks, and continuing and on a road trip going, where do I go from here? Where do I actually want to be? And having a lot of cognitive dissonance around things where it's like, I want to travel and see the world and go around. And also being like, it's really freaking hard to manage any company from a hotel room or a hostel room, let's say, let alone trying to do one where I'm on Zoom calls 6 hours a day. If I go to Europe, I'm going to be working from 4 to 10 p.m. Like, that's kind of how it works, and having those capabilities. So trying to figure that out right about now of where I want to be, and just now in a place where I love my company, I love my employees, I love my co-founder, and work. It's almost like I finally figured out what I wanted at work. I like what I'm doing. 5 years from now, I may switch out and try to work with nonprofits or advocacy or something that I'm really, really passionate for. But I really like what I do. And now it's almost like realizing that that's only one piece of the puzzle, and I haven't spent enough time figuring out what the rest is going to look like.
Right. So this is almost like you're saying in a way that what got you to launching your company is you couldn't find out there what you were looking for at work.
Yeah.
So you need to be challenged every day. And now that you have it, you have to find the right balance and find how you want this to fit into your life.
Right. One of the things that I mentioned at Click Software to a lot of my friends, and as Christine, you well know, I'm from a very poor town in rural New York, so I can't really talk to my friends from high school of being like, oh no, now I'm making a lot of money and I'm bored, as they're in a job with this, where it's like, they talk about the curse of achieving your dreams. Is I've now done it twice. When I first started, I really wanted to make a lot of money, to be able to save up a ton and to be able to not, like, I've never spent a lot of money, but I wanted to be able to make a lot so that I could retire early, that mythical, like, financially independent, retire early, and then I'll figure out what I'll do with my life. And then I got there. And it was almost like all of a sudden I could see the end of the tunnel with the amount of money I was making at Click Software and the amount of money that Salesforce was destined to give me a year later to 4 years later. I looked and I'm like, I could retire in 8 years, but I'll probably be stuck there. And I looked and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to spend like all of my late 20s and 30s doing this. And then will I want to cut down? Am I going to be too numb to it? It was almost like I saw the end of the tunnel and I saw what the next 10 years were going to look like. And I was like, oh God, is that really what I want? Like, I look at people who were 10 years further down the chain. You know what they were doing? Spending 150 nights a year at a hotel away from their family, drinking $50 worth of alcohol, trying to and eating steak with people they barely met, trying to convince themselves that this was worth not seeing their children's birthdays, and spending all of the extra money they made on really nice cars and really nice houses that they never got to drive or never got to see, and getting burnt out and going to another job. And I said, no, 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 I don't want that. I've always had a dream of starting a company. And then I started a company and went through trials and tribulations. And 18 months in, it's like, okay, now I see. Like, we look and it's like, I'm no longer enamored with the idea of growing from 5 to 50 in 2 short years. Because then it's like, then I'll just have more money, more people, more problems, and have an even harder time getting away from the office. So it's looking and saying, okay, figuring out what you want for your life, which is what a lot of people are trying to avoid. They're like, oh, when I make more money, then everything's going to be easier. There is an actual law about that, if nobody's told you on YouTube yet. In the United States, up until $70,000, and it's probably gone up a bit with inflation, money can make you happier. Not because it makes you happier, but because it removes problems. You ain't worried about paying the bill. You ain't worried about paying rent. You can go to the restaurant when you want to. But past that point, like, no, it doesn't. You've got to figure out what you want for your life. And all too often, they've shown that higher income earners are less happy, because once you've gone beyond a certain threshold, if you're making $200,000, you're probably a consultant or a lawyer or a doctor working long hours in stressful situations, doing something that people don't want to do with, like, your vacations are just trying to decompress your nerves that are shaking from what you're doing. And that's not always true, but there's a lot that goes into that. So you have to figure out what you want for your life first. And I wish I'd taken my own advice. But sometimes psychologically, and Jung talked about this, we avoid it because we know that if we let go, if we realized where the path was, we'd lose our motivation for the journey. And I was just telling someone this, where I was like, I now recognize how much of starting a business was that my dad sucked at running a business. And like, subconsciously, I wanted to prove him wrong and to figure it out. And I had this dream and this piece, but now I'm here. I'm like, still a job. I still wake up every day looking at the systems, looking at the emails, trying to make things work better, trying to do this. The glamour of it has to come from setting boundaries so that I can use it to live the life I want. And to be honest, I don't know if I necessarily have a better life from a dream life than somebody who works at M&T Bank in Buffalo with 6 weeks vacation and gets to work from home now. They probably have an easier, smoother life where they're able to come in, do the work, and come back. Like, you have the idea of the CEO traveling all around. Well, if you're a startup, that CEO traveling all around is stressing to God about the person that they're meeting, giving them money so that they can survive for the next 6 months. or they're traveling all around to meet and schmooze and booze a person that they've never even met, hoping to God they'll give them the next sales contract. You really got to figure out what you're looking for, then make your work fit your life, not your life fit your work.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I wouldn't say that like an entrepreneur life would be a way to kind of slow down and walk away from like these crazy sea-level travels and workload. But definitely, it's allowing you at least to build what you want and fit your work into your life as you wish, if
Yeah.
you're able to do so.
I can't remember who I just read who said this. It was in a book about mentorship, in which they're like, you have to be careful asking for advice or giving advice to a wider audience like this on a podcast, because one of the major biases and challenges is that I'm going to provide advice from my current situation and my piece looking back. And so most of my advice is mostly viable to somebody who is an entrepreneur in that piece. And it's almost like I can resonate with people, but it's hard for me to imagine that person 5 years ago who's reading 6 hours a day at Ingram Micro because they're like, I will not be stuck doing this. And if I had to actually give advice to that person, it was totally worth it. I would have been bored out of my mind if I stayed there for the rest of my life, and I would have regretted it. It's not that it wasn't worth it. It's just about allowing yourself to appreciate the journey and not rush it. It was recognizing like, I am in the right place for me. I sometimes put too much weight on it being too much of my life's purpose to do it. It's not the end all be all, and I'm now going to go back and balance. But I went in the right direction. It was just, I put too much pressure on myself along the way to get there, rather than saying like, I'm going to work steadily. It's going to be there. Like, the world's problems didn't suddenly get solved now that I'm here. So there was a lot of additional stress and fear and anxiety and over pushing myself that wasn't necessary in order to get here. I probably would have been a lot better off if at Ingram Micro, I set the intention, but meditated 20 minutes a day instead to kind of like get the anxiety out. I would have gone a lot faster, a lot more pleasant, and a lot happier. And I'm glad that's how I ended up at the place in Boulder meditating, because that really smoothed the path of the fear to get me to where I am now.
Yeah, but if you hadn't got through that, then you wouldn't be here today. So we then wish about how we thought before, how we processed all of this, but at the end, this is what made you become who you are. So
Definitely.
yeah, and I think it's a good thing actually. Looking back, if you see that the advice that you gave beforehand are not the one that you're giving now, it means that in a way you've evolved. So you can also take it this way, you know. When I look at this pandemic, obviously it's a disaster for the world, but at the same time, I think it has allowed a cultural shift in so many ways. I've heard so many leaders state how grateful they were because they were able to spend time with their family. And then remote work became something quite usual, while no one thought that we could adapt, and people thought it was unproductive, and we shown otherwise. And same, I think people began to center on what matters for them, realize like actually had to face the reality of their own world, right? Because otherwise it's, as you said before, we had Instagram, all these social network, when we want to pretend that everything looks great, everything's perfect, but the truth is we didn't even dare saying that we were not okay or that we were not feeling well. You know, when you said, how are you? Everyone was like, oh, I'm good, how are you? And now people actually, they are talking about their feelings and sharing. And this is one of the positive point of this crisis in a way. Yeah.
That's very true, because one of the foundations of allowing people to feel empathetic is shared experience, where, let's imagine this, like you're at work, nobody talks about how hard they have it, that they're going through a divorce at home, or one of their children is having behavioral issues, or somebody has substance abuse. Nobody, you don't know if you have shared experience with that person, and you're not willing to talk about it. But as soon as everybody is having cabin fever all around the world, you open up to see what's indoor. Like you see the kids screaming in the background. It's like, oh, I got to leave for this. Or like you have something that allows you to talk about it in a way where you're allowed to open up the door and peek into somebody's world beyond the facade of perfection that you're trying to portray.
Yep, very true. So last one, I would say, what advice would you give to your younger self? I think we pretty much answered this one, but I like to have your last thought on this.
I'll actually use an analogy that I've been trying to, or not a metaphor, that I have been thinking about and trying to explain for a while after spending that year in the Buddhist retreat center, is that, and I'm going to tie in a couple pieces. Tony Robbins talks about it pretty bluntly, and it helps explain, like I can sum up a bunch of psychology textbooks pretty simply. Your brain is not designed to make you happy. Your brain is designed to keep you alive. Therefore, it's on the lookout for threats. And as a result, it's going to be risk averse, especially in an area of conflict. So the way that I really describe this is that the vast majority of the world, at least in high stress countries, I can't really speak for places that are much slower, in a way are driving their life in reverse. And what I mean by that is they see things they're afraid of them. They're afraid of when they're looking forward and looking out. So they're trying to run away from those things. And they're doing it by driving the car in reverse. Every once in a while they look forward and they're super scared, so they try to drive the car backwards. And when you're driving a car backwards, it's really hard. The car only goes so fast. You're looking backwards, you're in the wrong direction. That's what the metaphor is supposed to mean. Like, you're not driving very quickly. And you're getting into accidents because you're stuck and you're looking forward at the fear, and then you're trying to drive faster. And the challenge for life is that in order to truly seek a life you want, to not be driving away from something, but to be driving towards something, you have to slow down and face the things you're afraid of. And what I see people do very, very often, and that's why you see people who chronically go to a retreat center or to try to meditate a little bit, is they try to come to terms with things. And that means slowing down the car. But a lot of people think meditation is all happy-go-lucky, like, oh, I'm going to feel really good. No, what you're doing is you're facing the things you're afraid of and learning to let them go and learning to process through them and learning to work through them, but just getting better at being present in the moment. And doing so is like slowing the car down to a stop. But all too often, people slow the car down, they start facing their fears, and those fears get deeper and more important and more personal, and then they eventually sprint back. They start eating a ton of food, coffee, this, they take on the things at work, subconsciously or consciously, they make their life chaos so they don't have to face those things. But it takes getting the car to a stop and facing all of those things and coming to a level of peace before you can put the car in drive and start facing in the direction that you want to go. There's no way to get there without facing those things and coming to peace, or else you'll create chaos. And that's what I really meant in the last question of, I would have gotten a lot further, a lot faster if I had done it sooner, of the letting go of those pieces, so that I could chase the things I wanted rather than having the things I wanted really be things that I was trying to make it away from, trying to make it away from poverty, trying to make it away from problems, trying to make it away from this, because I'm always driving the car in reverse. And that's really that thing that's a double-edged sword for people, is sometimes coming to face those fears means that some of your dreams go away, because your dreams weren't based on something you truly wanted. They were around trying to avoid something that you were afraid of. And that's what happens when people chase their fear or chase their dreams out of fear. And then they get there and realize it wasn't what they really wanted. And that's advice I really wish I'd given, is to really slow down. I don't mean slow down like the person who's made it as an entrepreneur saying, don't work as hard. I mean to not put so much stress about it and really sit down, meditate for an hour or two a day, figure those things out, and figure out what you really want and what's really what you're just trying to avoid, what you're afraid of. Because once you've figured those things out, then you're going to be able to run ahead without just being so scared that you're getting in your own way.
Right, that was powerful. But you mentioned living in a Buddhist meditation center. Can you just let us know quickly, concretely, how this went, how you lived there?
Wonderful and horrible. And the horrible piece is actually the one that ties into the last question, but I didn't want to tie it too long for you, is imagine you're having a bad day. Your friends in most major cities are going to take you out drinking to forget. Friends in a Buddhist retreat center are going to sit you down and make you process what's going on. And I will never forget me trying to use mindfulness to become more productive, and finally one of them getting fed up with me and walking me through a situation in which they're like, when I'm like, but you'd be more productive if you did this. And they had to ask the question like 10 times to me. They're like, but why? Why are you more productive? And they walked me down the path of having to come to the true realization, which you have to have for yourself and your brain to do it, of I'm trying to be more productive because I've been told all my life that I'm supposed to be productive to be a citizen, and I'm being praised for being more productive. And therefore I'm tying my self-worth into being productive. So therefore I'm constantly seeking it out because I'm seeking praise, and I'm doing that because I don't feel like I'm okay as a human being to just allow myself to do what I want. I have to sacrifice each piece of myself to be more productive, or else I'm a poor human being who's not worthy of anything. And they force you to walk through those things. And at that point, you may realize that all of your striving is to prove to yourself that you're a worthy person. And that's what people are afraid of, is at that point, you may go work on an organic farm or hike the world or do couch surfing. That might be what you actually really want for a year or two. You may give up on your dreams. Like, you may be cutting the foundations out of your pursuit of being a VP at a consulting company or pursuit of starting a business. You may realize those are just foundationally you trying to prove that you're okay as a person. And that's hard because your dreams have to be let go of in that state to find out what you really want. But it's recognizing that if you had chased those dreams, you would have been so afraid the entire way. You'd be getting in your own way because you're not battling to accomplish something truly worthwhile. You're battling to prove to yourself that you're a decent human being that's worth love and attention. And that's hard.
Yeah, well, even in one of his interviews, Michael Phelps, after beating the record of the number of gold medals and medals total at the Olympic Games, still had to realize himself that he was human, you know, and that he had to face those hardships. He still wonder about his worth while everyone thought he was the GOAT. And he's just also human. And this answers it all. So completely aligned on this, like just ask why, I think 7 times and you'll get the true reason, right? So yep. I think this is a great one.
Yeah. So that's the advice I'd give.
That's a pretty good one. So yeah, I was so happy to talk to you. Thank you again so much. And truly enjoyed it. And I hope it will be of service to everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christy.